So I created this presentation because I think a lot of times when people talk about negotiations, they feel like somebody has to win or somebody has to lose and it has to be contentious, and especially, when agents are dealing with other agents and things like that, I find that a lot of times, you guys make the situation messier than it needs to be. And the unfortunate side effect of doing that is that, you have about 30 to 45 days with this person. And not only them, the people that you work with in the transaction. So, you coming in there and just immediately throwing punches or creating a contentious situation in your negotiations or in your transactions is a tough way to do business. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that. Now, there's always times for you to come over the top on somebody, come hard at somebody. But most of the time when you're in a negotiation for this long a period of time, you want to do what you can do to not only win your negotiations, but kind of make friends at the same time. And a lot of people think that that can't be done. But I call that politicking. And that's why I came up with that, because that's what I think politics is. I think it's coming to, doing your best to come into a win-win situation, get everything you want, but at the end of it, not have an enemy on the other side. Because remember, you're going to work with these people again, and you don't want to have enemies on the other side. So let's get into it. Gil, I think we got some people in the waiting room, by the way. So I believe that you get what you want in real estate and you get what you want in life. I always say that real estate, I believe, is a way to play life. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you do real estate right, things in your life are going to become better, whether it's relationships with your significant other, whether it's relationship with your kids, whether it's getting other things you want out of life. If you learn how to control mainly your emotional reactions to things, right? So that's really the trick about this, is actually separating yourself from whatever emotion boils up at the instant that somebody says something to you that you perceive as a slight, or somebody trying to, or even having the thought and the feeling that somebody's trying to get something over on you. Let me let some people in.
I can't get them in.
You can't let them in?
No, I think, I'm not sure if I'm the host at all.
I made you, let me see.
You may have done that before when I was in the other room.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Well, maybe, I think you came in. Okay, let me make you co-host now. All right. You're co-host now, Gil.
All right. Okay.
So, separating your emotions from that. I mean, I've had people talk to me in ways like I'm just like my first day in real estate, and by keeping my emotional control together, I was able to get everything that I want. And that's what really I want to teach you guys today. So I want to tell you that it's really hard to get a check when you're pissing people off along the way, right? And I find that a lot of times people immediately have an emotional reaction to something, and they're blowing up at the title person, they're blowing up at the lender, they're blowing up at all these people, and you guys got to realize that in any transaction, about 30 people have their hand on your check, and for you to start, spreading a bad feeling, a bad energy, a bad attitude to those people is going to affect whether or not a deal closes, or even spreading an ego onto it. So I just want you guys to be cognizant of that when you're talking to the people in the transaction. And I'm talking to everybody. I'm talking about appraisers. I'm talking about lenders. I'm talking about everybody. Always start with a level of respect, but with the intention of winning all negotiations and getting everything that you want. Okay, so let me ask you guys, who's touching, who's touching your check in a transaction? I mentioned a few of them, but talk to me about some of you guys. Speak up and tell me, or in the chat, tell me who is touching your check in a transaction.
Our blue question.
Say that again.
What was the question?
Like, tell me the people, I just kind of revealed it, but tell me the people in a transaction who are actually touching your check.
The touching our check. So title, the lender, the listing agent, selling agent. I didn't want to cheat and look at that. That slide.
Correct. That's correct. So other agents. So obviously the person on the other side is touching your check. They've got their hand on your check. So you have to be cognizant of that. Obviously the title company, they have their hand in the transaction throughout. Appraisers, they also have their hand on your check. Lenders, we got Zach from Home First here. He's got a hand on your check. We've got buyers, obviously, and we have sellers, so and inspectors. So these are all people that we might have to have an interaction with. We might have to negotiate with, and you have to start with a level kind of emotional control and respect in order to do a deal with them and make sure that your transaction goes smooth. So focus on the check. Okay. I say there's no room for emotion, just winning. Some people say, oh, Bobby, how do you stay so calm and how do you not react? I'm like, it's really just selfishness. I just want my check, you know? So I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize my check. This is something that to me is very commonsensical, but oftentimes you'll see agents that are caught up in their own emotion. They're caught up in their own ego, and they have to show the person on the other side that they're the big dog or they're the big, you know, a player in town, and they have to go off on that person. And I just don't believe in it. So what are some common leverage losers? Number one is just talking too much. You know, when you get on the phone with an agent, when you're trying to get information, you know, Gil always says, curious people make more money. That means you should ask more questions and talk less, really. So you'll be surprised once you get somebody on the phone. And by the way, you know, when you're trying to fish for information from an agent, you know, on the phone or even in person, but on the phone, I think you're going to get a lot more information. It's too easy for somebody to deny you information by text. It's too easy for somebody to deny you information by email because it's just a simple type. They're kind of anonymous. They're separated from you. Give that person a call. Hey, Jim, you know, I'm calling you about house on 123 Main Street. Do you have any written offers on that property yet? And then be quiet, right? That person's going to feel compelled to answer. They're not going to you know, feel like they can ignore your email, right? They're going to have to answer you in some way, shape, or form. So when you're trying to extract information, make sure you call somebody and actually get them on the phone. And one thing I would say is always be friendly. Like I said, when I call people up, I actually have a smile on my face. I don't care who they are. I don't care if I were, hey, TJ, good. Hey, I see you're listing 123 Main. I got a buyer that's potentially interested in putting an offer in. Out of curiosity, do you have any written offers on that property? And he's like, oh, hey, Bobby. And then they just start talking and start giving you information. Okay, so but you don't want to be that person. When somebody asks you information, make sure that you talk less. Common leverage losers, reacting instead of strategizing. So, you know, I get a lot of agents call me and they immediately assume that some agent's trying to pull one over on them or some agent is disrespecting them or whatever the case may be. And that could be true. But your job is to actually have the emotional control not to react to that, you know, and kind of calm yourself down before you say something, okay? Emotional reactions that are about you, right? So, you know, if you react to somebody because you feel somebody is putting you down as an agent and sometimes they are, by the way. Sometimes somebody's, you know, you know, you're always going to run into agents that feel like they know everything and they want to school you. And I've ran into many of them throughout my career, and just don't react to that. You know, I actually use it to my advantage oftentimes, you know, like I had an agent who was a wholesaler who put a contract on my property, and he was like, here's what you need to tell your seller, blah, 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 and tell me what I need to dictate to my seller. And rather than, come back at him and say, well, first of all, don't ever freaking tell me what to say to my seller and do all that stuff. I was like, man, those all sound like good ideas. Let me see what I can do. Thank you for that information. I'm going to go talk to the seller. Now I hang up the phone and I'll be like, yeah, fuck that guy. Right. But he still thinks that he had a great idea, which means I got him in my corner. Right. I'm actually now, because that person has revealed themselves to me, I'm actually starting to drive that person now. You know, he thinks that his advice was so worthy. I'm going to go tell my seller about it. He's like, oh man, I like this guy, Bobby. You know, he does what I say. Well, behind closed doors, I'm not doing anything he said, but I don't have to let him know that. Okay. And finally, common leverage losers is making up stories about the situation. How an agent will react, or the seller won't go for this. So sometimes we create stories before we even try anything, right? So we think, well, we can't, send them this because we don't know how they'll react to it, and it could blow up the whole situation, right? What you guys got to know is buyers want to buy, sellers want to sell, listing agents want their check, buyers agents want their check. So the chances of somebody just throwing away a deal, even for the dumbest of agents, probably won't happen. I'll give you a perfect example. I got a call from Corinne in our office the other day, and she had a client who lost their job because of the coronavirus. And while she was trying to save the deal, the guy said, well, we'll give you a shot to get another job, but if you don't close by this time, we're going to take your deposit. And she called me up, and I said, well, okay, why don't we have them sign an extension addendum for the closing date, but in that extension addendum, let's also put in an extension to the financing contingency to protect this guy's deposit, right? And Corinne's like, oh, you think like he'll even sign that? Do you think that whatever? Because I was really trying to slip that financing contingency in, because once they sign that, now I can cancel the deal because of financing and get their deposit back, because she was past her financing contingency, and she was very worried about their reaction to it. And she just, I think it was this morning, she texted me, or last night, and texted me that they signed it. So now her deposit's protected. So she was kind of like torturing herself with stories, but those stories were not true. Or even say, they won't go for this, or the seller won't go for this offer. You don't know what, the situation of the seller is. You don't know that. And most of the time, a seller, even if you send them a low offer, will counter you. Or the other one that's probably the most I hear from agents is, this agent's just, this girl's, trying to pull something on me, or they're trying to be slick, and all these like, the thought is always they're trying to pull something on you. Most of the time they're not. I mean, sometimes they're trying to be slick, but we can always outsmart them. But the minute you react to the fact that you think that they're doing that, now you put that contentious kind of energy on your transaction, and now everybody's suspicious of everybody, and that's going to affect your check. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about purchase negotiations. Okay, so let's start, just talk about the purchase side for right now. So hold on one second. Let me make sure this is the right thing. Okay. Purchase negotiations. So listing side leverage. So what's some leverage that you can build on the listing side? Listing side, having a great property, power pricing. You want competition, not crickets, right? So as far as getting leverage from the listing side of things, having a great looking property that's priced is one of the best leverages that you can have in a transaction, right? That's why you don't want to overprice. That's when you want to make sure that your clients, clean the property, declutter the property, cut the grass on the property, and make the property look good. That's part of your job. You're part of your job. Gil always talks about this. When you walk into a home, it becomes your home. If you're listing a home, it's your home now. You have that attitude because you're going to have to tell your client some tough things like, hey, you know what? I love your pets, but it smells like dogs in here, and we're going to have to clean this place. We're going to have to give it a thorough cleaning so when people walk in, they get the right feeling. My job is to sell your property for the best price possible, and I can only do that if we go through A, B, and C and actually dictate the things that they need to do for that property. Hey, you know what? There's this repair right here at the front door. Go ahead and make that repair. It's the first thing people see. Go ahead and fix that wood rot right there, right before you walk in. The second one is pricing, what I call power pricing, pricing it at a price that gets maximum competition. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be overpriced, obviously, right? For many reasons, besides the fact that you won't sell the property, or the property is going to go stale, right? Every day that the property spends on the market, you lose leverage every single day, right? The first day a property goes on the market, guys, it's the sexiest. It's like your first impression. It's your chance to get the best buyer, right? And you don't want to waste it. You don't want to overprice because, once again, people who can actually afford the home are not looking for the higher price home. What do I mean by that? Well, you'll get often sellers say, well, I think the property's around 300, but let's price it at 325 because, I know somebody's going to come in low and we can kind of meet them in the middle. Well, that's a problem because most people that are qualified for a $300,000 house aren't putting searches out for $325,000 homes. So they're not even seeing that property. Okay. And because it's overpriced, you've got agents on the other side saying, oh, that's overpriced. Let's move on. So here are your
Can I jump
properties.
on that?
Huh? Yeah.
One more thing. And just so you know, I put your link on a live website. So we may have some people to jump into the room here who are not part of the alliance, just so you know. So you're on live. But the reality of it is that it's a lie. It's the whole like, hey, I want to price the property to make sure we have room for negotiation. It's a freaking lie. It's a lie that's outdated, right? So I think when eBay came along, it changed the entire real estate game. So when eBay came along and you could price something for $1 and watch it run up, it changed the way we price homes. I'll give you an example. My team, we price property at market value or below. In fact, this week we took a listing. Carla put the listing on the market. It's had 31 showings in the last 3 days. We have 6 offers on the property. And let me just tell you what the numbers would have been. The right price for that property was $209, right? That would have been the right price. The seller would have been very happy to take $209. We priced it at $199,000. We had a ton of people looking at it. So we opened the funnel way wide open, right? And now we're probably going to accept the price for $215 or maybe even $220. So the concept of leave room for negotiation really means leave room to be stale, leave room to be alone, leave room to have to drop my price to a point where you're going to lose value. So what I would tell you is if you have the conversation with your seller and your seller says, hey, well, I want to leave $10,000 just in case for negotiation. What I would teach them is let's just price it $10,000 lower or $15,000 lower, and let's leave room to win. Okay. But you have to explain that story to them. Okay. You have to have a personal story, and you can use Carla's story or 1,000 other stories. Let's leave room to win. Right. And then what I teach people is I say, hey, you want to see how I'm going to negotiate this? If I've got one person, would you please give me more? Or if I've got 4 or 5 people, is that your best offer? Is that your best offer? Hey, I need you to give me 0 days on inspection. There's no inspection. There's too many people who want this property. If you can't make a decision right now, I'm going to the next person. Hey, I need $5,000 more on the front end. I need you to pay my seller's closing costs. By the way, all the appliances are being sold. There's $2,000 each, $10,000 for the appliance package. By the way, I need to close in 21 days, not 30 days. If you can't do that, I'm moving to the next guy, right? And I just keep going through and I work all my offers and I get the best deal. Leave room to win. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, everything, I've done all this wrong, by the way. So you don't have to try it the wrong way. Like I know the impulse to please this person. I know the impulse to get the listing, but this is your chance to stand strong. This is your chance to essentially negotiate with the seller and let them know that you're the expert in this. I've had this happen where literally a $5,000 difference. I remember a property I was listing and I did my comps, which we'll do a comps class here coming up again. I did the comps and I felt like, man, this is really, I need this. I could justify 275, 280, but I just felt 269.9 was just the right price. And you know what? The seller came back and said, no, what about, 275? And I was like, well, it's only $5,000 off. Let me do that. Man, the property sat. You know what? It sat. And then finally, when I dropped it to 269.9, I got offers and I was like, gosh, dang it. We just wasted 30, 60 days on this. So don't make that mistake. One thing we always say, it's really easy to overprice a property, but really hard to underprice it, guys. Because, hey, if their worry is that you underpriced it, then the only result of underpricing is massive amount of offers and deals, which means that we're going to be able to go to each person and say, give me your highest and best, give me your highest and best, give me your highest and best, and drive that price up. And remember, guys, and the other reason for not overpricing is most people will be subject to an appraisal. You know, we got a lender on that. We got Home First here. Home First doesn't care what the hell you do. They're going to send an appraiser out, and they're going to tell you what the price of the home is. So make sure you comp this property right. Make sure you advise your seller right, or you're going to be in a situation where the appraisal doesn't come out, and now you're in this really weird negotiation where you're trying to hopefully, you know, either lower the price or meet in the middle. Okay. Your MLS presentation, I say this all the time. When you're talking to a seller, make sure you let them know, hey, all realtors have access to the MLS, but very few know how to use it. Okay. Very few agents actually post properties properly on the MLS. I mean, how many terrible photos have you seen on the MLS? I mean, nothing, you know, nothing will lose you money faster than terrible photos, you know, and we teach you guys how to make sure you put the best looking, sexiest photos at the beginning. Make sure you get professional photography. If you're not going to get professional photography and use your camera, make sure that your camera is horizontal so you get that picture that fills the entire screen on the MLS. Make sure you're decluttering. I always remember the story of Gil coming to my mother's place when I was selling it some years back. And it was the first, you know, I had the listing up already. Gil looked at it and said, these pictures are terrible, man. Let's go to your mom's house right now. And I'm like, all right. So we hopped in there, drove to Sanford, walking to my mom. Luckily, she wasn't home. Okay. We walk into this place, and like I went to go to like the bathroom or something. I come back, Gil's like dragging couches and moving stuff into other rooms. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, you're moving all this stuff around in my mom's house. He's like, dude, trust me. Let me show you what the pictures come out like when I take them. And he took the pictures, and I was like, well, you know, that shit looks a lot better. You know, he opened up the space. We saw the floor. We took a couch out to make sure that and we went to the corner of the room and took a big wide picture of the thing, and it made all the difference. I ended up getting a contract a couple weeks later. And then the Go Live system. So this is a way to get leverage as well, right? So we teach something called the Go Live system. So when you get a listing, guys, okay, you drop it on the MLS, great pictures, great descriptions, everything properly on a Wednesday, and you funnel all the showings to the first open house on that Saturday. Okay. And what's going to happen is you're driving all the showings into one place. Well, what's going to happen is people are going to look around and see other people looking at the house, and they're talking about it, and they're like, oh man, we better put an offer in right now because everybody else is looking at this thing. This property's hot. So we're driving that competition to it. And that's the Go Live system. We're not going to go in depth on that, but that's something that we teach here, and it's worked incredibly. Every agent that's done this properly has had massive attention. So if you price it right and you do the Go Live system, there's a very good chance. And in that first week, you're going to have a contract on that property. And that's what we want for you guys. So start with a winning offer. So I always say there's 3 things that you have to do. You guys, some of you guys have been in my classes many times. So you guys, you know, somebody who's brave enough, speak up and tell me the 3 things that I tell you guys have to do before you submit a purchase offer. Don't be scared. Or give me one. Gil, anybody in the chat saying anything? I can't control the chat right now. I don't know why.
First thing, I guess you call the agent.
Unmute yourself, Gil.
Yeah.
Karen says, do CMAs. Carl, I believe, says reach out to the agent. Tiana says do a CMA, talk to the listing agent. Those are the ones that came up on the.
That's right. That's right. So that's what I teach. So first and foremost, when you're writing a winning offer, you want to comp the property. Okay. So if you're working with a buyer, you want to make sure that the seller isn't crazy, right? That they didn't do what a lot of sellers like to do, or a lot of agents like to do, and kind of pull a price out of their butt, right? So the first thing I do is comp the property and make sure that the listed price is a legitimate price. Is it market price? Is it overpriced? Is this a steal? You know, so that's the first thing that I do. After I do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call the listing agent. So number one, we comp the property, know where our numbers are. So I know going into that conversation, whether they're overpriced, whether they're priced right, or whatever the case may be. And now I have the conversation with the agent. Hey, my name is Bobby. My client's looking at 3 properties. Yours is on the list. And we always say that because I don't want to lose any leverage. I don't want them to think you know, it's just like when they tell you you go to the car lot and not to act too excited about a car. You know, when you come in to talk to the listing agent, you know, I like to kind of say, hey, we're just kind of, hey, my client has you on a list of about 3 to 4 properties that they're looking at and would maybe potentially like to make an offer. Out of curiosity, do you have any written offers on this property? And then be quiet, right? And let them talk. Let them feel the silence and Gil.
What's up?
Did you stop my sharing for some reason? I said that. No.
Did I do that?
You might. I'll get back.
I was just trying to change my view. My bad.
It's all good. It's all good.
And just know that I've got a Dave Kennard webinar I'm going on at 11. So you may want to have Dan Rojas, who just jumped on there, do co-hosting with you.
Co-host with me. Okay, cool. So number 1, we're going to comp the property. Number 2, we're going to talk to the listing agent. And I say don't tiptoe. Just ask the question. Do you have any written offers on the property? And be quiet. Let them talk. Be friendly. Like I said, I always kind of call them with a smile on my face. I'm always like, hey, Terry, I'm calling you. I got a client who's potentially looking to put an offer on your property. He's looking at your property and a few others. Out of curiosity, do you have any written offers on the property? And just be quiet, let them talk. Well, you know, we've had a lot of activity. You know, it's been on the market only 4 days. And, you know, we've had 13 showings, but no written offers. And you just start getting information from them. Now, depending on the rapport you have with that agent, they might actually even tell you. I've had agents tell me, he's like, look, man, I don't want to mess around, man. I got an offer at, you know, 245. If you come in at, you know, 247, you'll win it. And I'm like, okay. You know, you just never know what you're going to hear. There's some people that are going to be a little bit more coy about it or not going to tell you anything, you know. At the end of the day, remember that the listing agent also wants a deal done and they want the best deal for their client. So, you know, even if somebody asks you that, you can kind of maneuver the situation. Don't tell them everything, but maneuver it so that you get the best offer. But in this particular case, I just want you finding information. Right? You're building a case, you've comped the property, you've asked the listing agent. And then the next thing seems pretty obvious, which is now is you're going to talk to your buyer. So now I know what the property's worth. I've talked to the listing agent. I know the situation. And now I can tell the buyer the strategy. And I say, dictate the plan. Like, once again, this is not a let's come up with this together type of thing, because a buyer might have their own ideas. You have to be straightforward with them and let them know if they're like, offer $20,000 less. We're like, look, I just comped the property. Okay. It's actually a good deal already. I've spoken to the listing agent. They've got 2 offers on the table. There's no reason to put a $20,000. You're not going to win it. Do you really love this property? Do you want this property? Well, here's what we got to do to get this property. Or it could be vice versa. You might have heard from the listing agent that it's been crickets. You look at the days on market, which was one of the better indicators of where it's at, right? Or, how attractive a property is. Hey, it's been on the market 75 days. I think we can offer a little bit less and still get it. Or let's offer a little less and ask for closing costs. That's how you can advise your client the best, okay? Trust your strategy. I think that this is the toughest part about agent, being an agent, especially one like me who's like a people person, is trying to please the other side. But at the end of the day, stick to your strategy, trust your strategy, and follow it all the way through. And at the end of the day, guys, if something doesn't work, they're going to blame you anyway, right? So I would say trust your own strategy. At least you did what you thought was right and went through with it, rather than let them dictate it, have it not go well because you listen to the buyer or you listen to the seller, and then they're going to blame you anyway. It's going to be the realtor's fault no matter what. So you might as well do it your way. Okay. So presenting a winning offer. So do not waste your first impression. So what I mean by that is that when you have an offer, and let me do this real quick because I got to move the screen. So when you're presenting the winning offer, don't waste your first impression. So this is what I mean by that is, when you're submitting it, if it's a great offer, make sure you let them know that you have a full price cash offer. Make sure also that when you're presenting the offer that you're doing all the little detailed things. So in other words, if I see that a listing agent has taken the time to put the title company in the realtor remarks, if I see that an agent, which was what we teach you, right? So your title company should be in the, Celebration Title Group, and their information should be in the realtor remarks. I don't want to have to ask you for the title company. It's right there in the realtor remarks. If I look up and I see that little paper clip at the top of the listing, and I see that they've attached the seller's disclosure and the homeowners association disclosure, they're a detailed person. They're a top agent, or somebody who at least believes in doing things right. The last thing I want to do is present them an offer without the seller's disclosure signed, without the title company in the contract, or whatever. Be detailed, because they're detailed. Make a good first impression. Hey, I read everything you took the time to do. Those attachments, I read them. When you said in the realtor remarks to check the attachments, I dig that. Hey, I saw that you put the title company in the realtor remarks. It's already in the contract. There's no loose ends. So don't waste that first impression, because guess what? Every time you make an offer, it says something about you. You leave stuff blank. You don't fill stuff in. You don't write things in right. You don't include the necessary forms that they've already given you, the homeowners association disclosure, seller's disclosure. It says something to me. It says you're not paying attention that much. You just kind of just throwing me an offer. And whether that's true or not, this is what it says. And I want you guys from the beginning to let them know that you're a sharp agent. You're a detailed agent. They're not going to be pulling anything past you. Okay. You're a detailed person. And then the same thing if you're on the seller side, which is be that detailed agent. We teach you that. Don't put a listing up and slap it up without the proper information, without the proper attachments, without the proper title company, and all that stuff. The other thing is, as a buyer, obviously put together all the necessary documents. I kind of went over that. And then I say master the offer email. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's simple. If you have a great offer and it's a cash offer, then you can simply on the subject line put, full price cash offer attached, 123 Main Street. Man, that's an exciting email to open. That's an easy one. And, you can just simply write a short sentence for that. Hey, Jim, just want to let you know I attached the full price offer, or I attached an offer. However, if you're submitting an offer where you think that maybe it's a low ball offer, or you might be thinking that, the seller wanted everything, right? They're like, dude, offer them, 10 grand less, plus I want 10,000 in closing costs. And you're submitting an offer that's based on what you see, based on what you've talked to, might be a little tougher to accept. Okay. What I would make sure you do is that in that email, explain your rationale. Don't just attach it and say offer attached, because you know what? I'm teaching you how to be non-emotional, but do you think they're like that? How many sellers that are personally insulted by this offer, or even listing agents are personally insulted because you just attached some offer that was essentially 20 grand under what they were listing it at? Well, I don't want to do that without an explanation. So let's say you have a client that wants to submit a lower ball offer. Okay. Well, first of all, what's the reason for it? Is it just simply because you have cash and you think you can make that happen? Or did you comp the property and find out that property actually is probably 15 to 20 grand overpriced? So you're offering low, but guess what? An agent that doesn't know what they're doing doesn't know that. They just think you're lowballing them. So when I write the offer email in a situation like that, I write that email as if they're going to be forwarding that to the seller. Okay. Why do I say that? Because what you'll learn in this situation when you're in negotiations, especially with your own client, is you don't want to ever sound like you're for the other side and not representing them. In other words, let's say I call that agent and say, hey, look, I'm sending you an offer. It's 20 grand under. Look, I don't think the property's worth it. I've looked at the comps. They're, they don't justify it, blah, blah, blah. And if I just tell them that, when they present that offer to their seller, if that agent has to say, hey, the seller, I'm presenting you this offer. This is what they said, that it's, underpriced and whatever. And honestly, in doing the comps, I told you that, when I priced it, it was a little bit high. We'd have to come down. Well, now it sounds like that person's almost advocating for the other side. And I don't want that feeling to happen for you, right? I want you to keep the leverage that you have with your own client and always make them feel like you're defending them. So when I send an offer to a listing agent, I put the whole case there. I was like, hey, Jim, I just want to let you know I attached an offer. It's not full price, okay? And I want to explain, it's not my buyer that my buyers loves the home. They think it's beautiful, very well kept and everything, but and the buyer's not trying to insult your seller. The reason that we offered what we offered is because we were doing some comps in the neighborhood, and I found that this property are set, that even the highest priced property in the neighborhood sold at X amount per square foot, and yours is only and yours is priced here. And I give them a whole case that way, and I write it in a nice tone and a respectful tone, because guess what? What I want that agent to do is just simply forward my email to them. That way they can not be the bad guy in the situation. And that's what I'm trying to teach you guys how to do here, because whoever you're talking to, I don't want you to be the bad guy to them. Because the minute that you become the bad guy to them, then now the situation becomes contentious. So I can say the same thing multiple different ways, okay? But when you're submitting an offer you don't think it's as attractive, or you think that it's going to be perceived as unattractive from the other side, write the email and the offer as if they're going to be forwarding it to the seller. Okay, guys? And a pro tip is make sure that you guys always text the agent after you email it. Don't ever assume that they received your email. Or call them up. Say, hey, just want to let you know the offer's in the email. Take a look. Let me know your thoughts. Just make sure and confirm that they got it. Okay. So next. So this is kind of on the same lines of what we were talking about. So let me go here. I see somebody hasn't been muted here. So let me see who that is. Okay. That was Kendall, maybe. Hey, Dan, are you going to be on for the rest of the time, buddy? I'm going to make you a co-host if you can, so you can mute some people for me. Rojas, you there? Haley, hey, Josh, you want to be my mute person?
Sorry, I can jump on now. Sorry, I had stepped away from it.
Okay. No worries. I'm going to make you the co-host.
Okay.
So whenever somebody comes on, just make sure you mute them. And if anybody has something in the chat, let me know.
Perfect. You got it.
All right. Perfect. So along the lines of what I was talking about, I always say you're a double agent, right? You got to play all sides. So whoever you're speaking to has to feel that you're kind of advocating for their side, because when they feel like you're fighting them, anybody from the agent on the other side or even your client, it's going to cause a contentious situation. It's going to be tough to negotiate with them and get the things that you want. So position yourself as the advocate for whoever you are negotiating with. You're always trying to get the best for the person you're talking to. And I'm even talking about the other agent, even if I'm not going to do it. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I told you a story about a guy who started to dictate to me what I needed to tell my seller in a situation. He was representing the buyer's side. He was actually a wholesaler, slick guy, calls me up. He's like, look, man, you need to tell your seller, blah, blah, blah. And this is what you need to do and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh man, sounds like a great strategy. I appreciate the information. Let me see what I can do. That's my answer. Let me see what I can do. Now, I hang up the phone and obviously I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. But they don't know that. They feel that I'm actually going to advocate for their side, right? They got me, right? They were so much smarter than me that they told me the right strategy. And now I'm going to go tell my side about it. And they feel very, very good about their ego when they did that. That's where I want them. I want them to feel good about what they did. But behind the scenes, I'm still going to do what's necessary to get what I want from my client. Okay. And remember, you are a transaction broker, which means you're allowed to play both sides. Your job is to get the deal done. You're going to find times in a transaction, guys, where somebody's shooting themselves in the foot, and it could be even your own client. And those are times when you're going to have to step in and show them the way to get the thing that they want. Because some people, guess what? Some of your own clients are going to have some ego issues. Some of your own clients are going to have some bullshit stories in their head. And you're going to have to deal with them in the same way. And you're going to have to, keep them from actually blowing up the deal that they actually want. You know, some people will blow up their own deal because of pure pride, right? And you're going to have to be good enough at this to negotiate with them, to keep them in the deal and keep them happy. And once again, never be the bad guy. It's always someone else giving the bad news. So perfect example, okay? I had the agent telling me, hey, you need to do this, this, and that. This is what you need to tell your seller. I tell him, yep, great advice. Let me see what I can do. Now I go to my side and whether my seller tells me this or not, I might just decide on my own, hey, I might call my seller and say, hey, look, I got this guy on the other side. This is what he wants to do. I don't think you should do that. This is what I think you should do. Okay. And if the seller agrees, I go back to that agent and I say, hey, look, I talked to the seller. Okay. I did what you said. I said everything you told me to say, and I really fought for it. But honestly, they just can't budge past this price, man. I tried everything that I could. Can you make this work? Well, then they're going to feel like, okay, well, man, this guy tried everything he could. And now I'm giving the bad news from them. It's not me, right? It's the seller that told me that. The seller told me that. I'm just the agent relaying the information. Even if I was actually the one that told the seller, hey, don't do what he's saying. I wouldn't move past this number. If you give me the permission to do it, I'm going to come back to him and let him know we're not doing that. And the seller says, yeah, go do what you do, Bobby. I trust you. I think you know what you're doing. I come back to them and I present them the story, but in a different way so that I'm never the bad guy. And that's how I want to position you guys, no matter where you're at. So here's a pro tip, guys. Always talk about how hard it was to get your client to agree to something. Answering too quickly is a leverage loser. What do I mean? So somebody asks you to do something. So a listing agent or buyer's agent asks you to do something. You go to your client. If you come back 5 minutes later just to tell them no, then it's like, okay, you didn't even think about this. It's perceived in a certain way. Okay. So if I go to my client and whatever the other side is asking for is a no from my client, and even if I called them like 5 minutes after I spoke to the agent, I sometimes wait. I'll wait like an hour. Okay. And by the way, is deafening. Even on their side, they're sitting there wondering, are they going to do what we want? Maybe I shouldn't have asked for that. Man, they're taking really long to respond to me. They're making up all sorts of stories. I want them to do that. Okay. And then when I come back, what I'm going to be like is like, hey, look, Cindy, I talked to, we went back and forth for the past hour. Just back and forth. I pushed. I got him to come up just a little bit. It's not what you wanted, but can we make it work? And then they'll feel like, man, this person really attempted to get the thing that I wanted done. Remember, I want Cindy to feel like I'm advocating for her, right? And her client, so I went to my side, and even though I got the answer in a few minutes, coming back to her an hour and a half, or sit on it. If you're not in a time crunch, right? Really, the main times you're in a time crunch is if you're butting up against an inspection period, a financing period, or if you need to put an offer in quickly because there's a lot of competition. But if we're just like, in the transaction and you've got 5 days left on your inspection, or you're just in the transaction, it's okay to let them wait a little bit, guys. Let them sit on it. Let them start making up stories. Let them start thinking that maybe they asked for too much, whatever the case may be. So use time as a leverage builder. Okay. So many of you guys have heard about Always Be Closing. That was from a famous movie, Glenn Ross. And actually, if some of you guys have seen our music video, Coffees for Closers, it was based on that movie. So he used to say ABC, always be closing. Well, I have a new acronym, which is always be ABCL, always be creating leverage, right? So try to create leverage in every interaction that you're with. That started from the very beginning. Remember when he called up and said that, hey, my client's potentially interested in putting an offer on your property. It's on a list of about properties that they're looking at. That's a leverage builder. Every conversation I have, I'm letting them know that, hey, you're not, the sexiest property in town. There's other people out there. Don't think you got me strong-armed, right? Don't think you got leverage on me. I'm always trying to create leverage, okay? So how do we create leverage? Once again, ask a lot of questions. Guys, I used to have this problem. Obviously, many of you guys know me, I like to talk. And this was my problem at the beginning as an agent, is I just talk too dang much, because I want to have a conversation. But the more you speak, you start letting little leverage losers out. You just start letting them out. And that's a bad position to be in. So first and foremost, ask questions and talk less. Start off with a question. Hey, Cindy, Jimmy, you call out of curiosity. Do you have any written offers on the property? Out of curiosity, I see that the property's been sitting for 75 days. What do you think the reason is for that? Or, hey, Cindy, I saw that I'm looking at the listing and I saw that it went pending and then it went back on the market. What happened? And just be quiet. The more and more you talk to Cindy about this, the more questions you ask, Cindy just starts giving you information, and starts to paint a picture, which starts to paint a strategy of how to submit the right offer or get what you want. Set expectations when the other side wants something. Okay, so sometimes I do this when somebody says, so once again, my angle is always trying to be friendly with the other side. So usually I have a pretty good rapport with the other side. So they might come to me and say, hey, Bobby, you think that they'll accept 10,000 less? Or, hey, Bobby, you think that if we do this, that they'll agree to it? And whatever it is, if I think in the back of my mind that there's no way that my client's going to do this, I start to set an expectation that is probably not going to happen. Okay. So this is what I usually say. Be like, oh man, $10,000 less. Honestly, I highly doubt that, Tim. I highly doubt they're going to accept that. But as always, I'm going to present it to them. I'm going to make the best case for it. But I mean, that's going to be a tough one, man. I'll get back to you, man. And then I use that time leverage again, right? So I get off the phone. I might talk to my seller or buyer a few minutes later. They might agree, or I might get them to agree to part of it. Say, hey, look, I wouldn't take $10,000 less, but maybe we give them something. Maybe we give them 1,000, or we give them a home warranty, or we give them something. What are you okay with? And then kind of settle that. And then I use time as my friend. I might wait for a while and then call them back an hour, maybe even 2 hours later, where they're over there like shaking in their seat. They're like, did we ask for too much? Are they going to be pissed? Is the seller going to be insulted? Is the buyer going to want to back out of this property? Whatever they're thinking, I want them to think, right? So that when I come back on the phone with them, be like, hey, Tim, it's kind of like I expected, dude. I went to them, their reaction was not good, man. It wasn't good. They were kind of like a little taken aback by the fact that you want an extra $10,000 off. But here's what I did. I went back and forth with them. I told them that you guys weren't trying to be insulting or anything like that. And I got them to give you $1,000 towards your closing costs, man. I know it's not what you wanted, but man, it's what I can do, man. I fought for you. And you know what? They're way more likely to say, you know what? Let me talk to my buyer and make the case for that. Right? So does that make sense to you guys? I hope you kind of, through all these examples, I'm going to be reiterating certain points, which is, creating leverage, always advocating for the side that you're talking to, never being the bad guy, but behind the scenes, you guys are maneuvering the situation. The reason I'm trying to get you guys not to be emotional is that anytime you deal with somebody who's highly emotional, they put all their emotions on their sleeve, which means I know exactly where they're coming from. I know when they're pissed at me. I know what they're doing. And I don't want you guys to be that person. I don't want you guys to give up that leverage. I always want you to be calm and steady and friendly, even if behind the scenes, you're maneuvering the situation towards your client's side. Another pro tip here, never negotiate against yourself. When you make an offer, always wait for a response. So, in other words, if you ask for something, don't get scared about it or don't freak out about it and come back and then and them say, oh, I don't think they're going to accept that. And then you say, well, will they accept this? Well, you just negotiated against yourself. You never waited for a counter to come back. never negotiate against yourself, okay? If you make some kind of offer or you ask for something, they need to first counter you. Because if you negotiate against yourself, you're negotiating blindly, and oftentimes you cut your whole leg off when you're doing that, right? They might have given you almost everything you wanted, and you got scared and negotiated against yourself. Hey, can you think that they'll be willing to give us $8,000 towards closing costs for the roof? And they're like, oh, I don't think, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back and it's like, no, they're not going to do that, man. And we're like, okay, well, what are they willing to do? You know, rather than you say, well, how about 4,000? Well, hell, they might have given you 6,000, but you never waited for the counter. So never negotiate against yourself. One thing I like to do oftentimes is hype up. And this, when I say highlight all the bad shit, but say how your client is willing to overlook most of it. Most of the time I use that with inspection reports. Okay, so this is going to happen to you guys a lot. So this is a common one, guys. So you're during your inspection period on a contract, you receive your inspection report back. Obviously, inspection reports are like this freaking thick, right? And they have all these little things wrong with it. First and foremost, if you're dealing with your buyer, make sure you set an expectation with your buyer that that's what an inspection report is going to look like. It's going to be thick and there's going to be a ton of stuff. You're paying a guy to find the wrong stuff. But really what you want to look at is the major things wrong, right? The things that could cost you a ton of money, not the little thing here, not the little outlet that doesn't work. If you can negotiate for that, no problem. But what I'm saying is don't let your buyer freak out because there's a report this thick with 100 things on it. There's only 2 or 3 maybe major things that could be on there, right? We're looking for major things like AC, roof, plumbing, you know, stuff that could be a huge cost for your buyer. So set the expectation with the buyer. But now you're working with your buyer, you receive the inspection report back. They don't freak out, but we look at the report together and we see, hey, look, you know what? You know, this air conditioning is a problem. You know, the inspector said that it wasn't running very well. It's reached past its life, and it's going to have to be replaced probably in the next 2 years. So we're going to, although it's kind of working now, I want to ask for some money to get that replaced after I close. So let's say that's the situation. So let's say I'm asking for $7,000 to replace an air conditioning unit after we close. Okay. So when I go back to the listing agent, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to send them, I'm going to send them the report because I'm trying to get something. So a lot of times you guys ask me, should I send the other side the inspection report? Well, you only send it to them when you're asking for something. If not, it's the buyer's report. And another pro tip, don't send the report to the lender. Doesn't require that report, so don't send it to them because they might find something in there that might hurt your deal. Okay, so that's for the buyer to have. Okay, so when I'm coming back to the listing agent, what I might say to them is like, look, man, we got the report back. You know, doesn't look so hot. I mean, there's problems with this, there's problems with that, there's this, there's that, there's this, there's that. But here's the good news, Tim. All my client wants is the AC repaired because that's the major thing. So we're going to overlook all this bad shit, you know, there. Even though my client didn't really care about it, I'm going to make sure that I highlight all the stuff my client is overlooking in order to get the thing that I want, because the feeling on their side is going to be like, well, that's really reasonable. You know, they could have asked for 20 things and they're really just asking for this major thing. And that's the attitude that they're going to take to present to the seller. Okay. And then the best leverage you can ever have is just something that's true, right? Just something that just you can't get past. I always think that, you know, if you're working with Home First Lending, you know, and let's say Zach Blesnick, who might or might not still be on the call, gives you an approval letter for, you know, $320,000, and that's the max they're approved for. Okay. Well, if somebody's asked, you know, if the property is like listed for 325 and you offer, you know, 320, and they come back to you and say, hey man, you know, they want full price, man. You know, the property's only been on the market a couple of days and they want full price. You know, the best leverage you have is I can't actually go any higher than this. I've actually maxed them out. They're doing everything they can. They really love your property. And they like that, but they can't go over they physically cannot go over the 320 mark. And oftentimes they'll look at their seller and say, you know, these guys are maxed out. they can't go. I mean, they would have, we're only $5,000 difference. We should consider giving them this deal. So use those things as leverage. Okay. Here's a pro tip. So let them win something you don't care about. Okay. Letting people feel like they won something is a good strategy to not only put a good feeling on the deal, but just to get what you want. Right. So, a common one that you could do, let's say your client doesn't necessarily need or want a home warranty. You could put a home warranty on the contract, up to an amount of $600. And if they come back and say, and let's say you ask for a home warranty and you ask for $7,000 in closing costs, and they come back and say, no, we don't want to give you $7,000. We'll give you like $3,000 in closing costs or whatever. Well, then, you might be able to say, oh man, we really need that $7,000 to close. But I talked to them and they're willing to get rid of the home warranty. I mean, it's not much, but at least it'll save you $600. Well, they might agree to that simply because they won something. They were like, well, at least I can take something back to my side and tell them that you guys are actually willing to budge. Or it could be inspection days. Let's say you have 10 days inspection and and you say, hey, look, how about this? How about we cut it down to a 7-day inspection, so the client, the seller can feel more secure that, we're not going to back out of this deal. Or, hey, how about, we give the client a bigger deposit so that they feel safe in this. Hey, Dan, looking to participants, looks like somebody might be trying to get in on the call if you're around, Dan. Let them feel like they won something. It's a great strategy to use. Okay. Trust but verify, right? So keep your eye on the other side. Obviously we can't trust everything the other side says. For the most part, I'm a believer that, nobody wants to lose their license. Nobody really truly wants to be unethical. But it's important that you do your research and do your numbers and don't just trust what they say, right? So, that could come down to just simply doing your comps, right? I'm not just going to trust the price that an agent puts on the MLS. And finally, get everything in writing, guys. I just had this, I just did a comps and contracts class the other day. And, even some experienced agents didn't know that if the inspection period expires, you kind of lost your leverage for asking for repairs or money for repairs, and they thought, well, if the agent, gives me their word, or once we ask for something, even verbally or by email, that, they have a certain amount of time to respond to that. So even if the inspection period expires, that they're still going to do what I say. Well, that's not actually true. That's why we have contracts, right? So if you have a 10-day inspection period, guys, at that end of day 10, you have lost leverage to ask for anything relating to repairs or money towards the property because that was your time. It expired. So you must get everything in writing prior to that time expiring, guys. Make sure it's signed by both sides. So if you decide on day 5 of your 10-day inspection period that you're going to ask for $5,000 in closing costs, you need to write up an addendum saying buyer and seller agree. The seller will contribute $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and or lender points. Write that in the contract, get it signed by your buyer, and send it over to the other side. And it has to be signed prior to the 10. Just because you sent it doesn't mean it's in writing. It has to be signed by the other side prior to expiring. So please do not be nonchalant about this. I've seen many people lose their deposit over this. Same thing with financing contingencies. This is coming up a lot right now because people are losing their jobs in the middle of a transaction. And sometimes they're past their financing contingency. So guys, you might want to do a couple of things. You might want to extend your financing contingencies at the onset when you write a contract, or you need to have them sign a coronavirus addendum that says that if something like that happens, that if my client loses their job, that I can cancel this transaction, because you're going to be in a weird situation if you're out of your financing contingency and somebody loses their job because of the coronavirus. Use the deadlines as leverage. So we were just talking about deadlines. What are deadlines? Well, inspection periods, financing contingencies, or any other deadlines that you have coming up in the contract. So another deadline could be the seller has to be out by a certain time, right? So if you know that somebody is in a desperate situation, and I'm not telling you to be a manipulative person, but it will help you get what you want, right? Like, you know, when somebody's backed up against a wall, for instance, let's say you were a seller and you had your property listed in the middle of this pandemic, and then suddenly a quarantine happens. Let's say that seller had an offer from Zillow Offers or OfferPad, which now are literally canceling contracts in the middle, right? So this seller had packed up, was ready to move out, okay? And suddenly OfferPad decides, hey, we're not gonna go through with the contract. Okay, so now this seller's out in the cold, they've moved their stuff out, they're going to their new place, and now their property doesn't have a contract on it. Well, you know, that's a deadline you can use to maybe get more of what you want. Say, hey, look, I got a cash buyer here willing to put in an offer. It's not going to be full price, but he'll get it closed quick for you. He'll close in 10 days. Suddenly you're getting a property for $20,000 under market value because somebody's up against the deadline. Seller has to stay for a certain time. So for instance, if somebody you're going to have a seller that says, hey, okay, we can have the closing on, April 15th, but I got to stay until the end of April, because my new home isn't ready. Well, if they have to stay for a certain time, then I can use that as leverage to get something else that I want. Okay, I'll let you stay in there for a couple weeks, but here's what I want. Whether that's, you're going to rent the property back out to me, or, hey, you know what? Rather than do all that, I wasn't asking for any closing costs. So tell you what, I'll let you stay in for 2 weeks, but give me $2,000 towards closing costs and we'll make it happen. Okay. Buyer must be in by a certain time. So sometimes buyers are in a desperate situation and they're pushed up against the deadline. And from the seller side, you're going to be able to negotiate for more. You have to know the situation. And this is why it's important to ask questions to the other side, to the other agent. The more information that agent spits out of their mouth, the more they talk, the more leverage you have to get something that you want. And then obviously we talked about inspection periods and things like that. Like I said, if it's running up against an inspection period or something like that, you can use that as leverage, and also financing contingencies. So pro tip, real quick. We always say, this is something I learned from Gil years ago. If they want something, get something, right? So if somebody asks something from you, you should think, is there something that my side wants that I can get because they're asking me for this? Okay, so here's a good example. Okay, so let's say I represent the seller side. So you have a listing right now. Some of you on this Zoom call have a listing right now. And you're within your 10-day inspection period, let's say, or 15 days, whatever it is. And you're on like day 5 of the inspection period. The buyer's agent comes to you and says, hey, look, we got the inspection report back. Nothing too major, but it looks like there's a good amount of little repairs have to be made. My client wants $1,500 or $2,000 towards their closing costs so they can make these fixes after this property closes. Okay, so now they're asking me for something. So I think in my mind, okay, can I get something? Is there something that I want that we can maybe exchange here? A good example would be to have them end the inspection period right then. So say, okay, let me talk to my seller and see what they say. Okay, so I talk to my seller, say, hey, look, they're asking for $2,000. Are you cool with that? Okay, yeah, let's give them $2,000 to make the repairs after. Okay, so in addition to that, though, what I'm going to ask them to do in that same addendum is end the inspection period that day. So we're on day 5 of a 10-day inspection period. The addendum is going to say buyer and seller agree that seller is going to contribute, this $2,000 towards closing costs, and buyer and seller agree that the inspection period and right to cancel period will be ended as of whatever date is, that day. Why do you want to do that? Well, if you're in day 5 of a 10-day inspection period, and let's say you just signed the addendum for them wanting the $2,000. Okay, so you sign it, everybody signs it, everybody's happy. Then it's day 7, and the buyer wakes up and says, you know what? I want them to fix something else for me. I want them to go ahead and fix all the sprinklers and do this, and that. Now they can come back and ask you for more stuff. because their deposit is not at risk yet. They're still in that inspection period where they can cancel. If you would have done what I said and had them end the inspection period, they wouldn't have had that option, right? They can ask for it, but I could be like, no, we're not doing that. What else? Oh, you won't do it? No, won't do it. And they can't back out, because if they back out, unless it's a financing thing, they're going to lose their deposit. So if they ask for something, you get something for it. So controlling the other agent, right? So mind control. So I don't want to get into this point where you guys think, oh, I'm here to manipulate people. No, but you are here to get the best for your client. You are here to have a smooth transaction, and you have to do certain things to make sure that you keep control of the agent that you're speaking to, right? So that's really what you have to do. So one is to build great rapport. I've talked about it several times. I make friends with agents, no matter what their personality is. They have their hand on my check. I don't want them to blow up my deal because of ego or emotional reaction. So I always build great rapport from the very first call. I come in with a good attitude, a smile on my face, and my tone is friendly. If they are inexperienced, and this happens a lot of times within a transaction, you're going to notice that the other side is inexperienced. It could be by the way they submitted the offer. It could be by some of the things they said. It could be by the way they wrote an addendum. And you're like, oh, wow, like this person's very new in the business or hasn't had good coaching or mentoring or whatever the case may be. I like to be, rather than, you get some asshole agents out there that want to go ahead and just like tell that person. I mean, I've had other agents tell our agents, like, you don't know what you're doing and you should be doing this and blah, blah. I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you throw that attitude towards a transaction? If I see that an agent is inexperienced, I'm going to do the opposite, guys. I'm going to become their best friend, because if I can become a friend to them, then I'm able to guide this transaction the way I want, because they're like, hey, at least this person's helping me. They're treating me with respect. So guess what? If an agent's inexperienced and they send me a contract and I'm like, oh, wow, like this person didn't fill half of this stuff out, this and that. And I'd be like, hey, rather than say, hey, do you know what the F you're doing? Who do you work for? Keller? You work for, whatever, start bashing their brand or whatever. I'm like, hey, Jim, hey, I got your contract, man. There's a few things missing in that contract. I didn't see you didn't click what kind of financing you had. You didn't put certain things in there. So if it'd be okay, would you want me to kind of write this up and instead of tell you the 10 things you got to fix? Would you want me to write this up for you and then send it over for your client to sign? I'll even take that process over. That means I get to write the contract the way that I want to write it, and I'll send it over to them. And by the way, I've done this. This happens. Hey, look, I wrote it up for you. Hey, it seems like there's a bunch of things you got to fill out. I went ahead and wrote it out for you. Take a look. If it's good with you, go ahead and have your client sign it, your buyer sign it, and then I'll get my seller to sign it. Okay, so become their best friend. What's another reason that you want to become their best friend? Well, obviously, if you notice they're inexperienced, there's a good chance that their brokerage isn't giving them the coaching and the mentoring that they need. And as you know, with our group, I don't know, Gil told me he put this link out to a lot of people, so not everybody in this group is with EXP. But if you are, you have a chance to add some value to that person's life. Our group is obviously a big believer in personal development, coaching, and culture. And if they don't have that, make a friend and invite them over. Guess what? Corinne, who's one of our top agents right now, I don't know if she's on the call, but Corinne is blowing it up. Guess what? Corinne came to our brokerage because my business partner, Gil, was doing a deal with Corinne and noticed that Corinne was inexperienced and said, I feel bad. I feel like I need to help her. And in building that relationship, she ended up coming over to our squad and now is on Gil's Zillow team and one of the top producing agents in the office. Had like 9 pendings last month. Okay, so this is something that you guys can replicate as well. Add some value to people in the experience. And once again, I mentioned to you this before, when you're submitting an offer or submitting something that maybe is tough to explain to the other side, whether you're talking to the buyer or seller side, write the emails, make life easy for them. Say, hey, look, I wrote this email. I put all the details, the links, I put links to the comps and everything in there. If you want, Jim, just forward it to your client, and have it come from me rather than come from you. Just like, I wrote it that way for you and make life easy for them. Okay. Pro tip number 4, and this goes back to what I was just talking about. Making friends with agents is very profitable. I have no idea why you would want to not make friends with other agents, because for the main reason being, you're going to run into them again. If they do any business at all, trust and believe you will run into them again, whether it's on a deal or it's at a networking event or whatever the case may be. Dude, don't be an asshole. Make a friend, build a great relationship with them. It's very profitable to do so. Why? Guess what? In the last 2 years, there's at least been 3 deals that I can tell you from the bottom of my heart I would have never gotten closed if I didn't know the agent on the other side. I mean, I literally had, and you don't even have to know him that well. I know a guy that I kind of know, and we've been friendly. He knows I'm a professional. I know he's a professional. Had a client look at a property in South Downtown that was like, remodeled for like 250 grand. And it was like, there was a lot of activity on it, and it went pending, and then it fell out of contract. I came in, I showed it to my clients immediately. They wanted to put an offer in. I called this agent up and I'm like, hey man, what's going on? We're going to submit an offer for this thing. What kind of showings you got? He's like, dude, I've got like 13 showings lined up. But he's like, but since it's you, I'm going to put it pending right now, and I'll give you like an hour to get me the contract. I'm like, dude, thank you. If I didn't have that relationship, he would have shown it to 13 other people, which, by the way, I don't mind giving up a little bit of leverage if I know a property's hot. Like, I don't got time to mess around and be coy. Hey man, what's going on with that property? We want to put an offer on it now. I know the price was hot. I know that other people are going to be on. When I called him up, I was just like, hey man, I got somebody, and what's going on with it? He's like, dude, I've got like 13 showings lined up for today. I was like, dude, what do I got to do to win? He's like, tell you what, give me go ahead and write up the offer. I'll put it pending now, so I don't feel like showing it to all those people anyway. Done. Okay? So make friends with agents. But what are some other reasons? 1, you want a friend on the other side. I just talked about that. Number 2, off-market deals. Okay? Perfect example. Guys, I have an off-market deal right this second, okay, at 2313 Marlborough Street. It's off the market, guys. It's not going on the MLS, okay? It is a property in South Downtown that is being remodeled into a 4-2, fully remodeled for $260,000. I mean, that's a unicorn. That does not exist in South Downtown. I know, I live here, okay? That's an off-market property that now you guys know about. That's 2313 Marlborough Street. I'll put it in the chat in a little bit. But that's a property that you have advantage because you know me. You know me, and now you know about this property. And now you can go to a client and say, hey, look, I've got some agent friends that got some deals that nobody else knows about. The public doesn't know about it. It's not on the MLS. This is something, this is a property. And guess what? That makes you look great. Anytime you approach an off-market deal that they couldn't find on Zillow or Realtor.com, it makes you look like a higher level agent. That's what I want you guys to be. I'm not looking to coach agents. I want to coach entrepreneurs and professionals. You guys want to be the people on the ground that know what's going on in real estate, not just somebody slapping stuff on the MLS or whatever the case may be. Number 3 is connections. I love the fact that we have a huge group we have about 175, 200 agents here locally that are part of just the Alliance group right here in Orlando. And I know I can go to any one of those agents and ask for connections. Like I always joke with Dan Rojas, who's co-hosting with me right now. Thank you, Dan. I always call Dan when I need like a plumber, a mechanic, or anything like that. I call him Rojas list, right? So, people call me up all the time. Do you know a good appraiser? So if you need connections, agents are a great source of that, especially sharp agents. And then finally, if you're with EXP, what all simply EXP did was allow agents to build a brokerage under them, just like anybody else, just like any broker would, except you don't have to be a broker and you don't have to have any expenses or liability. Because of that, every agent connection, every time you add value to an agent and they want to join your organization, okay, you're going to get a micro referral fee off everything they do. And not just what they do, but what everybody they attract to and they attract to and they attract to down to 7 levels. To give you some perspective on that, there's a single mom in our office who has personally attracted about 23 to 25 agents, but has about 80 to 90 people total in her organization through her 7 levels, making $3,000 to $5,000 in residual income every month. My partner Gil and I started with 100 agents in Central Florida. Now we're about 680 agents nationwide. We're in 6 or 7 states right now. That all happened in a year's time. You guys have the ability to do that in that model. Okay, so another kind of pro tip, right? Don't negotiate just to prove something, okay? So don't snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, okay? At the end of the day, your job is to get the transaction done. And sometimes people get too cute and they want to show their client how cool they are, so they're going to negotiate for things the client doesn't even want. You know, they're just going to try to be like, oh, let me see if I can get this extra little thing or whatever. And all you're doing is snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. Don't negotiate for the sake of negotiation. Don't negotiate for the sake of your ego. Negotiate for things your client truly wants. Don't get cute and think, okay, Bobby taught me how to negotiate, so now I'm going to, get cute with this and just negotiate on every single little detail. Because you can make a deal too messy where people just don't want to deal with you. And if I get somebody like that, I might tell my seller, dude, or my buyer is like, dude, let's not even deal with these people, man. Let's just cancel it because they're going to be a pain in the ass throughout this entire transaction. Remember that if your client wants it, they want you to make it happen, right? So if a client wants a home, if a client wants you to sell, they want you to make it happen. You know, even though they might get caught their own emotional stuff, the reality is a seller wants to sell and a buyer wants to buy. So be cognizant of that. Be cognizant of when your seller or buyer is shooting themselves in the foot, when they're getting too emotional, when they're like, you know, making assumptions. I had a client like that. He's like, you know, the buyer would ask for something and he would literally take it as a personal attack and he'd be like, is that guy effing crazy? You know, I can't believe you. I'm like, well, calm down. I was like, listen, asking for closing costs is actually quite common, you know? So don't feel like they're doing this to you, right? So you sometimes are going to have to step in there and be that emotional calm in these transactions. And remember, it's not about you. It's about delivering for your client and getting a check, okay? Deliver for your client. Make sure you get the check. Don't get into this pissing match with somebody for the sake of doing it, okay? So this is one of my favorite parts here, guys. So guys, please listen to, I say listen to this book. You can read it if you want to, if you're like more of a reader than an Audible or listening to books type of person. This book and this guy, Chris Voss, like he's actually, once I mention his name, you'll start seeing him a lot. Like he does one of those master classes. And he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, and it's all about negotiating, right? And by the way, what I'm teaching you here is not about negotiating just for real estate. This is for everything you want. This is literally like how to negotiate to make sure your kid does their homework. You can negotiate for everything, okay? And he teaches a very simple method to do that. Once again, I suggest you listen to it because I want you to hear his voice and I want you to hear what he does. This guy was a 30-year hostage negotiator for the FBI. And what he figured out was that negotiating with your wife, negotiating with your kids, negotiating with another real estate agent, negotiating with a seller is pretty much the same as dealing with somebody who's taken somebody hostage, right? We assume that everybody's rational, right? But somebody who takes somebody hostage is inherently irrational. And you have to kind of assume that at the beginning and understand how to get people to do what you want to do. You're not going to lecture somebody into doing it. You're not going to logic somebody into doing it. I mean, how many times have you tried to explain something to somebody that's so incredibly commonsensical and logical to you, and you're like, I have no clue why this person doesn't get it? Well, guess what? You're about to find out, okay? So Chris Voss wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. Please write that down and listen to it, okay? So this is what you have to know. The key to getting what you want is making the other side feel understood. Okay, let me say that again. The key to getting what you want is making the other side feel understood. When somebody's being irrational, guys, I'm telling you, whether it's a client, whether it's an agent, whether it's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, when somebody's being irrational, okay, you will not lecture them into doing what you want, okay? No matter if the facts are on your side. Trust me, I have tried it. Okay, how many of you guys, I'm sure, raise your hand, you've been in a relationship where okay, I have all the facts on my side and this person is still doing the same dumb shit, right? So it's very, very frustrating. This is what you didn't understand, that what they really want you to do is understand them first, okay? Understand their point of view so that you can make a change in their point of view. If you don't get to the level of understanding them, they're never going to do what you want, right? So it's the difference between saying you're right versus that's right, okay? So what's the difference between that? You ever argue with somebody and you're like telling them all the facts and you're going at them, and then they finally say, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And they say that and you're like, I won. Great job, Bob. You got them to say you're right. And then they go back to doing the same shit they were doing before. And you're like, what happened here? Like, they said you're right. Well, guess what? You're right is kind of just a defense mechanism. All they want you to do is shut up. You know, you're right is not what you want to get to. You're not trying to prove that you're right. What you want them to say is, that's right. And they only say that's right when they feel understood. When they feel that you've expressed to them that you understood their point of view. And the minute they say that's right, the whole wall comes down. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. Okay, so there's kind of a 4-step method to this. So first and foremost, when you're talking to somebody, Chris Voss mentions you got to use your late night DJ voice, right? Which is a very kind of like soft, calm voice when you're talking to somebody, not something that's agitated. So, you know, if you can picture the late night DJ that's in the scene, like, you're like, hey, how are you? My name's Bobby. Yeah, that's a late night type of low DJ voice. Now, you don't have to be all corny about it. I suggest you listen to the book and kind of see how he does it, but mainly keeping a calm, steady, low voice when you're doing. So one, use your late night DJ voice. The second thing you're going to do is ask what and how questions, open-ended questions, because this is what he figured out. So he would, you know, there's so many sales books out there that were talking about how to get people to say yes. You know, just get them to say yes, 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 and then they're going to say yes to you. Well, that shit doesn't work with an irrational person, right? And by the way, all those old sales techniques, everybody knows now, so nobody really responds to them. But what he realized with these hostage takers was that if he was able to ask them enough what and how questions, open-ended questions, what it made them do is figure out the solutions to the problem themselves, right? So for instance, if a hostage taker said, Bobby, give me $1 million. I have your son. Give me $1 million or I'm going to kill him. And instead of being like, all right, you know, let me figure out what I got to do. And, you know, the Chris Voss would say, how am I supposed to do that? That's all he would say. How am I supposed to do that? And suddenly the hostage taker was like, okay, well, I don't know. Like, I didn't work this out yet. So now his wheels are turning. How is he supposed to do? Like, how does he get me the money? Like how? And then the next question would be like, how do I know he's alive? And now the hostage taker's like, okay, well, I got to prove to him he's not going to give me the money unless I prove to him he's alive. And now suddenly this becomes way more complex. And now they're starting to figure out what the problem is. Well, you can use those same tactics when you're dealing in real estate. Ask what and how questions, right? Make them think about what the problem is. So have them come up with solutions to your problem. You know, here's a question. What would make this the best outcome for you? You know, you could be talking to a seller. Hey, out of curiosity, what would make this the best outcome for you? How would you like that to happen? You know, you're talking to a seller, you know, if somebody's like, hey, you know, I want $10,000 more off. How am I supposed to ask how am I supposed to ask my seller that? Like, how do you seller that? You ask these questions and they start thinking, oh, I don't know, how would you ask somebody that? And then they start answering their own questions, you know, and they start figuring out their own problem. And oftentimes you end up getting what you want, or, you know, ask, how do you think I should go about that? You know, once again, what and how questions. It's tough. It's tough because sometimes you want to spit a question out and you don't want to use words like why. Why would I do that? You say, why would I do that? Well, immediately they get defensive. So reframe every question into a what question or a how question and get them thinking about the problem. So, they ask for something irrational. You ask them a what and how question. Okay, well, what's the main reason you're asking me for that? Just keep asking questions. Let them talk. How did the seller, seller's demeanor when they ask you for that, or whatever the case may be. And the more I get them talking, right, and the more I listen, the more information I'm getting. So make them continue to elaborate. So as they talk, let them keep talking. Ask them more what now questions, or there's a simple method of repeating the last word they said. So they're like, oh, the seller said they want an extra 10 grand. And if you just say an extra 10 grand, they'll keep talking. Yeah, because they're saying that, this and that, and okay. So, and they say something else, like, oh, they want you to repair, all the wood rot. The wood rot? Yeah, because there was something that came up here, and and you just keep repeating the last thing they say, because I want them to keep talking. I want them to keep telling the story. And don't be afraid of awkward pauses. Don't feel like you have to fill the silence, right? So when you ask them a question, just be quiet. Let them feel awkward. Let them start talking, and use the pauses to your advantage. Let them feel the pressure to have to tell you more and more information. Okay.
Karen's got a question, and she said, how would you respond if they say that it's your job to figure it out?
What just in general, or is that for something specific?
She didn't have it for anything specific. I would say probably in general, like if there was a dilemma that came up and they responded with, well, that's your job to figure it out.
You could say, well, I understand that, but out of curiosity, how would you handle it? I just want to get your take on it. How would you handle it on your side? So I can understand that, sure. But how would you handle that with your client? And so if it's your job to figure it out, once again, don't react, because that's kind of like one of those things that you could easily emotionally react. You just say, yeah, I can understand that. It absolutely is my job to figure it out. But I'd love to get your take on it. How would you approach that? Okay, so that's how I would do it. Okay, so you've got your late night DJ voice. You're going to ask open-ended what and how questions. Okay, you're going to get them to elaborate, whether you ask them more questions as they go along, or you just simply repeat the last thing that they say. My seller's really annoyed by this. Annoyed by this? And then let them keep talking, right? Okay, so you've done those first two things. Now it's time to do a recap. And the recap is super important, because this is the point where you've been attentively listening, and now you're to be able to recap their story back to them. This is very important. Don't ask questions if you're not going to listen. Make sure you listen to them. Make sure you understand where they're coming from, even if you disagree where they're coming from, because it doesn't matter what they're saying. It matters that they feel understood. So the recap, you can recap something in a couple of different ways. So they've just gone off for 5 minutes talking about this and that, and how their seller feels or how their buyer feels and what's going on with this. And you've asked all these open-ended how and what questions, and there's been some solutions in there. Maybe there haven't been, but you've gotten the story. And now they be quiet, and you say, okay, well, it seems to me that the main thing that your seller really wants is be out by a certain time, and they feel very stressed that we keep asking for certain things, delaying the process. And once you recap that, you pause, and you're looking for them to say, that's right. Okay, so it seems to me, or it sounds like what you're saying is, okay, and it's just simply of what they've said. And only if you listen attentively will you be able to recap the thing that they said. Okay, if I understood you correctly, what you're saying is that your buyer loves the house, but is a little scared that after they buy the home, that there's going to be a bunch of problems with the home. That's right. Understandable. Well, I know that they're asking for, $5,000 in closing costs, but do you think that if we were able to give them a $600 home warranty, that we would be able to ease those fears for them? You see what happened there? So you recapped it for them, so they felt like, man, they really understand where I'm coming from. Okay, so you're going to recap, you're going to pause and wait for the magic words, right? Which is, that's right. That's right. So I'll give you an example from the book. So from the book, he was talking about the actual author of the book had a son who played football. And the son used to play a position like defensive line where it was really important for the son to have contact, right? It was like, if you guys know anything about football, defensive line or offensive line, you're basically people movers, right? It's just like contact. You just go full force into somebody else. And it's just a very gruff and aggressive type of position, right? And so what happened is that his son's coach decided to switch him positions. They thought he might be better at a linebacker position. And a linebacker is not up on the line. The linebacker's job is to tackle the guy with the ball, which means that oftentimes you're actually trying to shed contact, right? You're trying to avoid the contact in between you and the ball carrier. You're not trying to hit everybody. Well, his son, being a former defensive lineman, was having issues because he kept hitting everybody. Like, rather than making sure he got people out of his way to make sure he got the guy with the ball, he just kept hitting everybody on the way and wouldn't make the tackle. And you know what? The coach kept telling him, hey, look, you need to start shedding those blocks. Stop hitting everybody on the way to the ball carrier. Just sidestep those guys and go straight toward the ball. And the kid would just nod his head like, yep, I get it. And then he would just keep doing it. And I'm like so frustrated. His dad would have talks with him. Hey, the coach is telling you, man, you don't want to hit those guys anymore. You want to avoid them, and then you want to go to the guy with the ball. And you know what he said? You're right, Dad. You're right. And guess what he went back to doing? Same thing. Once again, every game, going back in there, not making the proper tackles because he keeps hitting everybody. So finally it occurs to the 30-year hostage negotiator that he needs to use his own tools against his own son and make his son feel understood. So, in asking his son, what he felt about his position, right? So it's, hey, what is it about, like linebacker and defensive line that you feel is like different? And he had his son explain. And finally he goes, well, it seems to me that the reason that you're not shedding the blocks is because when you were on the defensive line, it was kind of a source of pride to hit everybody. Like, that was part of who you were. That was part of, like, your badge of honor when it was being a defensive lineman. And now that you're a linebacker, it's all changed, and it just becomes tough to not hit everybody. And then he shut up. And then his son said, that's right. And that very game, his son started doing everything right, because all he needed to feel was that his father or anybody in the world understood where they were coming from. So that's the magic of this process. That's the magic of you reading this book, Never Split the Difference, is making sure you make the other side feel understood. Even if you don't remember everything that I've said today, just keep in your mind that what you want, to get everything you want, you got to make the other side feel understood. So if you're thinking about arguing with your significant other tonight, and you're thinking about lecturing them like you always do, think about making them feel understood and tell me what the difference is. Message me and tell me how it worked and recap what they said to you. It seems to me, from what I'm understanding, and watch the wall come down, because once the wall comes down and they say that's right, it's time for you to introduce the new idea. Okay? Now let's see if we can get them to do what we want, right? So they feel understood. They've said that's right. So one easy phrase would be, if I, would you, right? So if I were to eliminate the buyer's fear by giving them a home warranty, rather than giving them the $5,000, giving them a home warranty, and that would ease their fears, would you guys move forward? If I, would you, whatever it is, if I were to do this, would you do this? Or another way to say it is, if I do X, would you do Y, right? But that only comes after you've asked the questions, after you've understood them, after they feel understood, and now their wall comes down and you can introduce a new idea. So use the info that you gather to present something that feels like a win for them and is a win for you. Okay, so once you understand what their true pain point is, see if you can solve it and then introduce a new idea. Okay, and that's the way that you're going to get people to do the things that you want and get everything you want without having a major battle on your hands. Because as you guys know, once people get defensive, it's over. It's over. You're not going to get what you want. It's going to be a battle, and it's going to cost you potentially a check or a deal. This was something else. So that's the end of the presentation, guys. I'm going to get out a screen share and take any questions that you might have. Dan, I haven't been looking at the chat, so there might be some questions in there I don't see.
Yeah, the only question was Josh had he loved the presentation. He said you've got some great nuggets today. He was curious if you were going to put this recording somewhere or where you would put it.
Yep, I'm going to put it on. I'll put it on the Alliance Home Team, and I might put it also in the Dead Agent Society, so Facebook page. So if you guys haven't actually liked the Dead Agent Society Facebook page, please like it. That'd be huge for us. Like I said, we're trying to build this kind of a street level coaching brand. We feel Gil and I, have a culture of teaching street level real estate tactics, which I think is very different from what's being taught out there. So any support we can get, any value add we can give to people, we want to do it. What else? Let's see. I'm looking at the chat.